Hello and welcome back to Tennis Unfiltered with me, James Gray of iNews.co.uk and the iNewspaper. It's day one of the US Open and we're here to look back at a dramatic Monday. Seeds falling galore, Djokovic and Swiatek winning with ease, no surprises there. And I've got George Belshaw here to look back at everything that happened overnight in New York. We're recording this in the interests of full disclosure on Tuesday evening. So we are slightly behind the game, but I'm hoping to catch up tomorrow with Calvin, who is, of course, out in New York. And I hope watching Murray currently try and chop up Corentin Moutet along with a couple of 100,000 people who've got Sky in the UK because it is on a free Sky channel in the UK. George, are you recovered from your dramatic flight back from Malta?
Yeah, it was far less dramatic than it could have been, I suppose. We were the last flight into Gatwick. Obviously, I assume... Well, maybe most people won't have seen this because it might have been a very UK thing. But basically, all the air controlling networks went down in the UK, so flights just could not leave or land in the UK, basically, for a lot of yesterday. I haven't really actually checked if it's all fixed now.
It's still kind of carnage because they're all in the wrong place. So they're there, and all the crew are in the wrong place, and it sounds pretty bad.
Yeah. So I was coming from Malta, which is like a three-ish hour flight. So I think I was one of the last short haul flights to kind of make it back into Gatwick. So there would have been other longer haul ones that set off from the US or wherever. But it just meant we landed and then didn't really know what was going on, parked nowhere near the airport, and then they had to kind of drive us around after about half an hour and were saying, oh yeah, there's no space here because no planes can take off. And then got into arrivals, it was an absolute dead town, just no one there, completely empty. Feeling pretty smug just flying through it all, and then get to departures and see all these people hanging off every orifice and smugly walking past them out of there. So yeah, it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, that's the important thing to remember, George. It could always be better and it could always be worse. I was going to say something mean. You could be listening to a different podcast, but there are other podcasts out there, and some of them are really good. But this one is Tennis Unfiltered.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Have we got a policy for our head banging to that theme tune yet? I'm not sure
my
I've worked
policy
it out.
usually, George, as YouTube viewers will know, is just to stick the kind of opening credits over our faces so that you can't see us messing around. Yeah, but
right, so I can actually do whatever I want in that section.
Well,
right?
Yeah, within reason. Well, what I have kind of considered doing is creating a sort of 80s sitcom style, da 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 da. Of each of us
with our names kind of flashing on the screen like a kapow. That would be quite
James
cool.
Gray, George Belshaw, and Calvin Betton because he's the big name.
Yeah, he is definitely our permanently guest starring. And we're very pleased to have him, sort of figure.
Yeah, with Calvin Betton, something like that.
or without today.
Well, yeah, exactly. But that is kind of, as people know, that is the nature of the beast. Of sometimes it's me because I'm travelling. I'm not travelling this time because of wedding commitments elsewhere. But I am still going to be travelling because I'm going to Scotland on Thursday for said wedding. So I shall be trying to do one of these from a castle somewhere in East Lothian in a couple of days. So we'll see how that goes. And then next week I'm going to be doing it. Sure. So next week I'm going to be doing it from an apartment in Paris. So it'll still be glamorous. I'll tell you what I learned today, George. The Rugby World Cup Media Centre is at Roland Garros. So I'm still going to get another dose of Grand Slam tennis this year, but it'll just be in a very... I'm really intrigued to see what Roland Garros looks like in August. It's quite weird. I assume it looks the same. It's not like Wimbledon.
I guess that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because the stadium's pretty nearby, isn't it? It's
well, no, because it's Stade de France, which is up in Saint-Denis. They're not using Parc des Princes, which is the one right opposite Roland Garros. But it's a really big media room. They've revamped it probably since you last went, maybe?
Definitely since I've been there, yeah.
So it's really big, and it makes sense to be down there. I don't think it'll be anywhere near full because not everyone will be in Paris by any stretch. But Anyway, that's the nature of my job these days, running around covering all sorts of things, and occasionally not tennis, but this time it is tennis, and for the next 30 minutes or so, it will be tennis. I think we're going to start with some congratulations to Calvin, George, because he successfully predicted the opening shock. I think it had already happened by the time we recorded our pre-tournament podcast, which is Holger Rune losing to Roberto Carballes Baena 6-3, 4-6, 6-3, 6-2. I don't think we're going to talk about tennis very much here, George, because we're mostly going to talk about what Holger Rune said afterwards, which was specifically about Court 5. Now, I think it's important to note that Holger Rune wasn't blaming the fact that he was on Court 5 for the defeat. But given that he wasn't blaming it, he did talk about it an awful lot. Just to give you a kind of précis, he said it's not difficult playing there, but it's different. You're more close to people. It's a nice atmosphere. So, I mean, no problem with the court. I just didn't expect to play there. I feel like it's normal, as best you get in the ranking. I mean, he's the number 4 seed. It's more like, how you say benefits you should get with playing in better conditions. So that's a normal way. It's also how ATP, it's how they do it with all their players, but they didn't do it with me. That's obviously disappointing. Not going to blame the court on the loss. He played very solid, credit to him. And yeah, he had done a tweet with the map of it and sort of, a bit of side eye at that. I mean, George, it's not... The thing is, you can have a whinge as long as you win.
Yeah, I'm a bit torn on where I kind of fall on this one for him, really. I kind of feel like he's not a big enough name yet to really command definitely having a top show court. But
he is the number 4 seed.
But he is the number 4 seed, and there's not really... I don't know, I can't really remember the other men playing that. There was Novak, wasn't there? And I guess Tsitsipas Raonic was a good match, potentially, to be on a higher court, but...
And there was Gauff as well. Like, you have to think about the fact that there are a lot of Americans in both draws, and that's always going to get bigger billing on bigger courts.
He's not been that far in many slams, has he, really? So I don't feel like people, as we've spoken about before, the 80% who aren't watching it all year round will necessarily be that familiar with him. So I guess that's kind of fair from a scheduler perspective.
I suppose so. I mean, I like I said, I think it's not great to turn up and be like, look, and he gets asked questions about it, and I think if he learns anything from this, it is that if you get asked that question and you really mean it, and you mean, look, I don't want to complain about this, then just say it's nothing to do with the court. He played really well, and just give that flat back, because if you start talking about it. We as journalists will go, oh, he wants to talk about this. We're going to keep asking him questions about it and keep following up on things that he says and really expand upon it. If you just give that really, really nothing answer, it's very hard as a journalist to then go, oh, can I ask you that again? And you can shoot me down as well.
Yeah. And probably don't tweet sarcastically about where you play before a match is also good advice.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, he's not been in great form, has he? So I guess the result's not an amazing surprise. But I do think we should give a bit of a shout out to poor Carballes Baena, who's had a year of dreadful Grand Slam draws. That it's nice for him to kind of come through one. I think it was Djokovic, Tsitsipas, Rune, who he lost to at Wimbledon, and then wins the rematch. I mean, that's pretty rough by anyone's standards.
And now he's got Aslan Karatsev, who absolutely battered Yuri Lehechka.
I told you that's why I was put off Lehechka. You never know what you're going to get with Karatsev, who's, it's a bit of a nightmare.
Indeed.
From a fantasy perspective. As we all know, if you didn't pick him a few years ago.
Yeah. Let's not talk about that. And also, we've changed the scoring system since.
True.
We've introduced
anti-Karatsev.
Yeah, exactly. We had to nerf Karatsev because he was too powerful.
I think it was Calvin who was particularly cross about it.
Yeah,
so.
Well, really.
We need to keep him happy, don't we?
Yeah, well, that is basically our only job. Yes.
I don't think he's entered the last few fantasies. We need to start calling him out.
It's because the thing is, when he's actually got players in, I kind of sympathise. It's like the 3 days between the draw and the main draw starting are literally his busiest days of the year. So I do forgive him. But I think maybe... I
reckon he can spend 20 minutes at night.
Well, I think what we should do is, as a prize, the winner of a Grand Slam, their prize is they get to pick a team with Calvin. the next time around. I don't know if that's a prize or that should be a wooden spoon. I'm not sure. So they have to do like a call with him, be like, "Oh, I thought about doing this person," and then Cam be like, "No, that's a stupid idea. You're an idiot. He's awful."
Maybe if he can't find the time, we could introduce as a prize whoever wins fantasy tennis at each slam can then pick a team for Calvin at the next one and kind of give him public humiliation.
I like the way that like whenever Calvin's not here, we're just like, how can we ruin his life? Right, let's move on to one of your favourite topics, George. It's Dominic Thiem, a win against Alexander Bublik, his first Grand Slam victory in 2 years. It was his first match at the US Open since he won it. The last 2 times he had won in 5 sets and lost 3 of the last 4 against top 20 players. George, I would love to tell you that this is a turning point for Dominic Thiem. But Alexander Bublik is not the guy.
No. Yeah, I mean, as we'll come on to, he's also just not really covered himself in much glory in that match as a whole with some comments. But, you know, you've just got to feel a bit happy for Thiem, don't you? I mean, he's had such a horrendous time with injury. He's had some quite bad draws, really, as well. I mean, he came so close against Tsitsipas. I think he lost to Rublev in one of the last few. I think 3 of his last 4 slam defeats have been to top 20 players, which kind of surprised me in some ways. Like I kind of just thought he was slumping to, I think it was Pedro Cagini lost to at the French Open in 5 sets again. And I kind of felt like most of his slam losses had been more like that, like just players he maybe, you know, he wouldn't have lost to before, whereas some of them have been a bit, okay, actually they're not bad players. Even if Thiem at his pomp would probably roll them. So yeah, I'm very happy for him. He's a nice guy and he's not had the best of luck, has he? And maybe James, he's going to go on a US Open win streak again and win the whole thing.
I mean, he is
a big maybe.
just going to put that out there. Don't like to make bold predictions, but that feels like an absolute no-brainer. He's got Ben Shelton in the next round.
He won't come through that, will he?
Kind of think that Ben Shelton's going to be getting hold of that single-handed backhand.
You'll start to believe. You'll start to believe if he gets through it.
No, I think 35.
It's more forehand that's the problem for Thiem.
Well, I'm just thinking 35-degree conditions and like a very like bouncy, hard hit ball into his backhand wing. I don't know. It's just anyway. We must talk about. All right, okay, and then he's got. Well, actually, then he's got either Karatsev or Carballes Baena. Crikey, it's all opening up for Dominic Thiem.
He's going to do it.
God, don't say it. I mean, what a story that would be. I mean, I know I'm kind of mostly joking, really, when I say, "Oh, don't talk about it," just because George would be insufferable. But from a genuine tennis perspective, like people know who Dominic Thiem is, it would be a pretty good story. They might also say he's come back from a crippling injury to do this. How good is the modern era? And one of those people might be Alexander Bublik, who during the match appeared to say, "I am effing sick," and he didn't say effing, of giving careers to disabled people during the match against Dominic Thiem. He was sort of referring to the fact that he's also lost to Stan Wawrinka and Gael Monfils recently, who've obviously been on injury comebacks. Now, Nick Kyrgios took the opportunity to have a go. This is low-key horrible, he said. I think some people might claim it's high-key horrible. I can't hear and my Russian is not sharp enough, even though I did do it at A-level, exactly what he said, but this is what people are alleging, and I've yet to see any challenge that is not what he said. Yeah, all right, pretty bad. I mean, it's also Bublik and like says all sorts of nonsense, and I'm not surprised. I would be surprised if this is the first time he's overstepped the line in what he said.
Probably
and
the first
actually
time it's been picked up.
Yeah, exactly. It's just that we've noticed.
Yeah, I think I just don't really understand how your brain goes to these ones, goes to that sort of phrase. Like it's just
it's
weird.
Not nice. But then, like, you know, I remember bringing this up with Dan Evans once. I can't remember what he said, but it was some nonsense. It wasn't, particularly offensive. It was just a bit weird, and it was about something specific. And I was trying to follow up and get a newsline, and he sort of said, "Oh, mate, you can't bring up stuff I say on the court. I'm an absolute lunatic on the court." and there is an element of that, but equally there absolutely has to be a line. It's not a very nice thing to say, and I think if Alexander Bublik has any sense, and I think probably someone around him does, he will not try and like shimmy out of it, but he will just come out and say, sorry, I was having a really bad day. It was a really stupid thing to say. I don't think that. Here's £10,000 to a charity of someone's choice. And then just like, I just always amazed when people so often offer up apologies 2 days later and they're like, oh, I was actually trying to refer to his struggles that he's had and why, you know, and it's like, no, just like you said something in the heat of battle that was stupid and offensive. Say sorry, make amends, move on.
Yeah. Not to kind of minimise what he said, but it has started me thinking about what's the weirdest thing you can remember someone saying on court. I remember like Fabio Fognini threatening to bomb Wimbledon was right up there.
I mean, the reality is, George, it's probably something Stefanos Tsitsipas said.
Didn't Medvedev call the umpires a cat or something?
Oh yeah, a small cat, so that he didn't say
that was a bit old.
You know what they mean. I think the one that really sticks out in my memory is Stefanos Tsitsipas. Excuse me for a second. Complaining about this gentleman has filled my box with his towels. That was really special, actually. Like, I just so good. I don't know. I don't think I have much to top that. I'm sure there are better ones. I mean, some of the
comments. There's got to be some good ones.
Some of the Serena outbursts have been pretty good. Like, not gonna lie. And then that time that she wanted a coffee on court, that was quite funny. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Let us know in the comments down below, because this is YouTube now, and I can point down below like I'm a YouTuber.
Oh,
like and subscribe.
No point. This is fun. Yeah.
Or if you're not on YouTube and you're listening to the podcast like an adult, then you can.
Don't kill off our new beloved fan base, James. Come
on. Then you can drop us a tweet, Unfiltered Tennis, or you can email us, tennisunfiltered@gmail.com. We've had lots of emails this week.
Have you?
Yeah, on all sorts of different subjects. It's quite difficult because it's a Grand Slam week to get into them, because it's like there's so many different things going on. So I tell you what, George, if we've got time and you're not too tired and you don't mind this podcast being maybe as much as 40 minutes, Andy Lee, who actually emailed in with a different question, he was the man with the umpire chair question, which is very good.
Yeah, which was a great question. That sparked a great discussion.
There is a fancy team called Invisible Umpire's Chair, which I think might be Andy. But even if it's not, I really admire it. And actually, Andy, I had quite forgotten because I only read out the very last bit of his email. Andy, I have met. He came up to me and Calvin up in Nottingham this year with his son Callum. They do their own podcast, a rugby league podcast called Loose Forward Pod. So yeah, it was good chatting. They've got their 100th podcast coming up. Congrats, guys! That's a tremendous commitment. And he says, "I love your pod as we have very similar styles. Solidarity, Calvin, because you've got one voice of reason, one stats guy, and one grump."
Dare I ask how many podcasts we've done?
It's about 250. Incredibly, yeah.
God. When did we start this? My mum was asking me this earlier.
George, stop getting distracted. We're on a tangent already. We're about to tangent off it. Right. Here's Andy's other question that I didn't read out the other week. He says, if I'm looking for an overseas break, what would be a fantastic event to attend as a spectator? I love the more relaxed atmosphere of proper tennis fans that Nottingham provides. One indoor and one outdoor, please. Well, I can tell you, I went to Antwerp last year, which is an indoor tournament in October. It's dead easy to get to because you can just get the Eurostar to Brussels and then get the train to one of the nicest train stations in the world, which is Antwerp train station. Don't stay near the train station because the area around it is the old diamond district and it's a bit grim. But the old town in Antwerp is beautiful, great beer, great chocolate, loads of really nice, what they call brown bars, which is like the sort of traditional Belgian bars. And it's not about a tennis tournament either. It's just a 250, but you know, when I went, it was like Thiem, Korda, Murray, Draper, Hurkacz, I think, played as well. I mean, Murray pulled out and Draper got injured, but it was supposed to be good. And Gauff played as well, of course, because it's a home tournament. Outdoor, George, you like Madrid, don't you?
Madrid's the one I went to most, actually, outside the UK. Yeah, I did enjoy Madrid. It's a good city. I think the one I would say to go to, though, from a viewing perspective would be Monte Carlo. I mean,
right.
There's just a fantastic view there.
Super accessible, yeah. But
super accessible.
Andy's going to be like, oh, great.
I was thinking for the indoor one, I didn't do this one, but people have said Rotterdam's quite a good indoor one.
And that's so that's like
kind of
February, isn't it?
Yeah, apparently loads of courts there.
Right. And they always get a pretty big start list. Like Murray's obviously won it. Vavrinka plays it.
I think Rublev's played before.
Yeah, Rublev plays it. Yeah. The only thing I would question with that is Rotterdam isn't the nicest place in the world. But you can just go to Amsterdam. And crucially, you can get there on the train.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can do a bit of train hopping around.
Yeah. But there you go, Andy. And incidentally, if you, the listeners, have got any good suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. tennisunfiltered@gmail.com if you've got good recommendations for tennis holidays.
And we do need to pencil in one that we go to, a rogue one, like a new mag or something to take.
Well, George, it's got to be one of the Stards, hasn't it? Gustard, Bastard. I mean, people do say that Gustard and Bastard are both really nice tournaments, like genuinely. So that might be the answer. Maybe we'll go on honeymoon, and you can come too, George. See how popular that would be. Right, let's move on to another successful prediction. Not one I take a great deal of pleasure in, but as I said he would. Felix Auger-Aliassime lost to Makenzie McDonald in the first round. I don't know how much more there is to add to this, George. He hasn't spoken afterwards, so we can't really get into the nitty-gritty of what may or may not be wrong with him. But I can tell you from having spoken to him this summer that he really was talking about stuff that wasn't fixed and stuff that was going to keep bothering him. And I just smells like that again, doesn't it? Like Makenzie McDonald is not a guy who has as much tennis talent as Felix Auger-Aliassime, scrappy though he may be.
Yeah, I think kind of the main reflection I'd have on this is just what a shame it is where the kind of Canadian players have gone, really. Like Shapovalov, Felix, it felt like they were going to be two comfortably top 10 players battling out later ends at the slams, possibly even winning some. Obviously, they were kind of kicking around a little bit before Alcaraz was flying onto the scene. And, since we've seen him, we probably think their games are far more deficient, but they are talented players. Dennis is a huge shot maker. Felix is an incredible athlete and also excellent shot maker as well. But just has not happened for either of them. And I think that's a big shame for tennis because they felt to me two of the most marketable players in the men's tour. If you could have a big four of Alcaraz, Sinner, and the two Canadian guys, I think and Holger Rune as the kind of bad guy, that would be a pretty cool little generation if the tennis matched up to the potential kind of characters kicking around there.
Another, and kind of lump into that category as well, Sebastian Korda, who similarly has a really fun game to watch. He's a good-looking guy. He's a great talker. He's got a great story, obviously, with his dad having been a Grand Slam winner. He's mates with Andre Agassi. His sister is like world number one golfer. Like, there's so many elements to this story, except he can't bloody win a tennis match at the moment. And he lost to Martin Fucsovics in 5 sets, which, I think probably for Korda, an absolute nightmare matchup.
Yeah, I think Fucsovics falls similarly in the Kaya Kanepi field, really. Of just an absolute player you do not want to see first round of a slam unless you're Novak Djokovic.
Yeah.
He's not an easy draw.
No. But the other kind of big bit of the draw, because that bit of the draw was already quite open and is now even more open for Francis Tiafoe, who made it through in straight sets, as I mentioned yesterday. Casper Ruud, incidentally, also won and took a big chunk out of social media again, so I'm very pro that.
When's he coming for our podcast? We need to start saying nicer
George,
things.
I don't necessarily want him to listen to our podcast. I don't think that'll be good for him. It won't be good for us. No, don't need that. Taylor Fritz's draw is wide open because he came through Steve Johnson for lost just 5 games, as we all expected that he would. But Lorenzo Musetti lost to, and I think this is the first time I'm ever going to say the name Titouan Droghi, who
He should
is...
be my favourite tennis player, shouldn't he?
Yeah, he should, because you are the Drog. You could both be the Drog. He is 22 years old. He is French. He's from a place called Villeneuve-Saint-Georges in the southern suburbs of Paris. He's playing in the main draw of a Grand Slam for the very first time. And that is just about everything I can tell you about him. He's won 2 challenger titles in doubles and 3 in futures doubles. He's won 4 singles futures titles, but I'm really struggling for much more. So, I mean, that's a huge win for him to beat Lorenzo Musetti in 5 sets. I appreciate that Musetti is probably the most mercurial man on tour. Well, there's a lot of competition for that. But he's now playing another qualifier in the second round, Jakub Menšik, who's from the Czech Republic, I believe, or Czechia, as we're supposed to call them in tennis these days, who I think is a junior Grand Slam runner-up quite recently, like maybe even last year at 17. So there's going to be a pretty rogue name coming out of that and getting on a big court, probably against Taylor Fritz. It's all kind of set up for this Fritz-Tsitsipas 4th round match, which probably means one of them's going to cock it up.
I mean, Fritz will do bloody well to cock up this draw. I know we've spoken about he's not been able to kind of translate that tour form into the slams, and there've been quite a few really disappointing losses, but this would be the cherry on the biggest cake of all time if he can't get through that. Good for anyone in fantasy who picked a qualifier in this section, though. That's a couple of rounds that you kind of nailed off. I don't know how many did.
I'm just going to have a quick look, actually, and see how many people did pick the Drog, as I'm now definitely...
I can't believe I didn't pick it.
Yeah, I'm actually disappointed in you.
Disgraceful.
One person picked the Drog. That is incredible.
Is it one of the teams that's made their name as some sort of weird attack on me?
No. I tell you what, it is regular player, and I'm going to mispronounce this, and it's really embarrassed me. Ivan Guichawa, I think is the correct name, who is a regular in the... I think he's Belgian off the top of my head. He has emailed into the show before, as I seem to recall. Sorry, Ivan, if I've butchered your name, but that's what we do. Someone even commented on Twitter that I called out Ever and McEnroe for mispronouncing Djokovic and then immediately mispronounced Sakkari. Sorry, my modern Greek isn't as good as my ancient Greek. Anyway, 8 people did pick Jakub Menšik, though, so well done if you picked him.
Very good.
As I lose my light.
We have a knowledgeable fan base, I always think, James.
Do we?
Or at least ones who are good at clicking the right buttons.
Filling out a Google form with due randomness, yeah, maybe. Sorry, I'm just going to fix my light. I have a fancy light and it just went out of nowhere. There we go. Technical issues. Lovely. I'm not even going to edit that out. I think it makes it authentic.
Yeah.
Lovely.
I've just lost my bloody women's qualifier as well, so I'm grumpy.
Oh no, George, what happened?
She lost to Janina Whitmire.
Oh no, you picked against the lucky loser. Never do it, George. Never do it. Elsa Giacomo, incidentally, is a set down, but she's 2-love up in the second set. So we still believe. Right, moving on. Are there any other results you want to pick out of the men's draw, George? I mean, Tsitsipas battered Raonic, which is always possible it could happen. As you say in the show notes, Djokovic cruises through, water is wet, Pope, Woods, Bears, Catholic, etc.
Yeah, not much else to say there. I think I'd probably flag TFO and Tommy Paul doing well as well. They're probably the other names who were playing yesterday that we think might do well and got off to good starts.
All right. We'll move on to the results for the women's draw after this. So, in the first round of the women's, we did lose yet more seeds, as we almost always do. The most significant one being, I think probably everyone will agree, although I did kind of predict it, unfortunately, Maria Sakkari, who lost to Rebecca Masarova. She was pretty upset afterwards, Georgia. Because I didn't see the press conference originally, and I sort of made a slightly mean joke on Twitter, which I did regret afterwards because she did seem very upset. And, you know, I suppose it is easy to feel sorry for her because I was going to say there's a lot of pressure on her, and there is and there isn't. Like, she's number 8 in the world, so she's highly ranked, so she's clearly capable of winning tennis matches. But it just seems like in big moments, something... I don't like to say she bottles it, but it does feel a bit like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there was that French Open, wasn't there, where Was it Krejcikova won it?
Match points, yeah, in the semi-final.
Sakkari felt in a good position to go on and win that title there, and fell apart, and just hasn't really been the same since. I would say.
Well, actually, she revealed in the Netflix doc that she actually quit tennis after that. Like she literally quit for like 4 days and just went off on holiday, and then sort of started to go over and rang her coach and was like, "Okay, I will give this another
overreacting." Again, I mean, we spoke about Felix and Dennis there. There was a little period where Tsitsipas and Sakkari were pushing each other to be kind of the best ranked Greek player and making kind of confident noises about being the best player in the world, and taking that next step, and it's just slowly petering out, really. I don't know, is it more pressure coming from a country like that where you become such a huge star because there aren't so many other kind of massive sporting stars by comparison, or with tennis?
I think to an extent, yes, although I actually asked Maria Sakkari this actual question, George, last year.
Well done.
Yeah, well, thanks, mate. When I interviewed her, and she basically said, "Well, the first thing she said was, look, I'm not that big a star because basketball and football are so big in Greece, and basketball is absolutely enormous in Greece, and probably, in fact, it is the second sport in Greece. So that takes away a lot of kind of fame." And she does say that now she kind of gets recognised in the street a little bit, but, it's mostly just people saying, well done, or come on, or good luck, or whatever, and that it's not too bad. But I think probably she is putting a brave face on that. And I think the Netflix doc did do quite a good job of revealing some of that anxiety and that, that kind of pressure that she does feel. And yeah, of course, I remember talking to Elena Ostapenko about it, and she was like, "Yeah, like it's pretty crazy when I go back to Latvia. Like it's pretty full on, and that must be a real change of pace as well. If you go around the world, your whole life, 8-9 months of the year, and then you go back, and all of a sudden it's like that. I think because you're almost not used to it, and so you kind of have to get used to it every time you go home. I don't know. I'm not quite sure of the answer, and I'm not quite sure that Maria gave me a truthful answer, to be honest. But
I guess, I mean, maybe like I'm thinking of kind of bigger countries. Is there that much pressure on a Francis Tiafoe compared to a Stefanos Tsitsipas? Does the American audience care so much? But then it's a Grand Slam nation, so there's actually much more intense spotlight on you in those moments as well. So swings and roundabouts, perhaps.
Yeah. It's sort of same story with Caroline Garcia, I would suggest, who lost 4-1 to Wang Yifan, the qualifier. And it's kind of the same thing, isn't it? She doesn't come from a small country, but there is a lot of pressure on her, and there has been a lot of pressure on her that she, the French Open, she talked about it quite openly, that it was too much. And as a kid, she was a superstar as a youngster, and that was a lot to get through as well.
It's funny with these players, though, isn't it? Because I kind of see both of them as relatively similar, because I know Garcia was a much more highly touted prospect. But I suppose they had that period of both kicking around 20s and 30s in the world, and both felt like they were getting over that mental side of things and having an elongated period of success high up in the game. I mean, particularly Garcia. I mean, it really felt like she was someone who'd turned her career back around and suddenly jumped off a cliff again. It's crazy, really. Tough sport. Yeah,
it's hard work. I'll just quickly run you through the other women's seeds we lost yesterday. Anhelina Kalinina, not a massive shock there, losing to Sarah Sorribes Tormo, who's one of the better unseeded players kicking around. Same could be said of Elisabetta Cocciaretto and Kaya Juvan, not the biggest kind of surprise in the world. But Veronika Kudermetova, maybe a little bit of a surprise. She lost in straight sets to Bernarda Pera, who's not someone I've always associated with big results at Grand Slams. But
she was Joanna Konta's biggest rival for a while. They just kept playing each other in tournaments and took her out. So I remember her quite well from those days.
I see. Okay. Well, maybe I shouldn't be that shocked because Kudermetova's barely won a match since the grass. But I don't know. Just stuck out to me a little bit. things to talk about on the women's side. I think we should talk about the new greatest shithouse, George. Laura Siegmund. I mean, I know it's not new, but good for her to get a chance to really shithouse her way through a match on the global stage against Coco Gauff. Took a set off her, but then lost in 3 to open Arthur Ashe. Had all sorts of fights with the umpire, with the crowd. Gauff had to go at the umpire, saying the umpire wasn't doing their job. She eventually got a point penalty, Siegmund, that is, in the 3rd set, but took so many liberties, I think, that I was pretty blown away by it. Like, watching it back in the morning, because I couldn't quite stay up, but watching the sort of clips that someone had put together, it was pretty spectacular. I'll let you have your say in it in a second, George, and I know you're going to enjoy a shithouse, but if you want to be a shithouse, I think that's absolutely fine. Like, I think that should be allowed. But you can't be a shithouse and then go into your press conference, as Laura Siegmund did, and say, look, tennis is about entertainment. I'm out there to entertain people. Like, I'm sorry, there's nothing entertaining about you taking 45 seconds to hit a serve and getting away with it, or like taking medical timeouts to try and piss off Coco Gauff. Like, you know, she was like, oh, what did she say? She said, I know the fans out there are out there so you don't give up and so that you fight and it's sport. I was like, well, kind of, but like, I think if you want to be a massive shithouse, absolutely fine, but own it. Just be like, yeah, I'm trying to win a match. What do you want me to do? She's going to beat me if she plays her best tennis and I play mine. So let's give it a go.
And the best shithouse is wind the opponent up much more rather than earning themselves point penalties. I would suggest as well. Yeah, I mean, if, as you say, she says there's a degree to which these things get us talking, and it is interesting. And I think there's probably a degree to which she honestly just thinks, I can't beat Gauff if I don't do something out there. If I don't try and really ruffle their feathers and make this a scrappy street match or whatever. So from that perspective, you know me, I think they should kill to win, James. You know, I want them to fight for it.
Yes. What's the Neil Warnock quote? You've got to die. You've got to die to get 3 points.
What a documentary that is.
Yeah, for anyone who hasn't seen, this is, again, not to be too Brit-centric, but this is a British football manager from the north of England who is particularly, I don't even know what the word, but he doesn't mince his words, let's say that. And it's definitely worth. I'll put there's a lovely YouTube compilation of the best clips from that documentary.
It's
I'll put it in the show
versus
notes.
Pep Guardiola, who probably more familiar with, which is a great set of like Guardiola trying to get the kind of max out of his players, and then Warnock saying all these odd things to hit. So.
The best one is my favourite. We're going off a tangent again, but my favourite one is. It's like after a game they've lost and the player who's had a shock is sat in the corner and Warnock's sort of walking around, stroking his chin, just thinking what to say. And then he looks at me and goes, Danny, go and run baths, son. I'll be sick of a look at you. It's just priceless. But anyway, there is no... I don't know who's the Neil Warnock of tennis. There really isn't. Apostolos Tsitsipas, maybe, I was thinking. Don't know.
There's no one who's done such a weird walk towards the cameras with their eyes wide open.
The sort of bird
that
thing.
needs to be replicated.
Yeah. Tennis needs more really eccentric coaches, I think. But just to talk about tennis very briefly, if we must, Coco Gauff, probably not a bad thing to get pushed a little bit and be in a little, get the feeling of a big crowd match as well. Like rather than just cruise through 3-1, maybe just good to get that in her legs.
Yeah, I think so. She's obviously played some really good stuff, and it's good to kind of be reminded that none of that really matters compared to this tournament. Coming into an event like this, a home slam for a superstar of the sport, winning 10 out of 11 matches does put a bit of pressure on you, but also creates quite a lot of belief, I imagine, as well. And she's probably feeling, I can win this tournament. Whether we agree with that or not is one thing, but she will believe that. She does have a lot of belief in herself. But you do need to kind of guard against the fragility. It can all go very wrong in a flash in this sport, and you've got to guard against that. So, yeah, good to get an early test.
Yeah. And also, really, really sweet. She met like the Obamas afterwards, and like was just so pumped about it. She said, "Oh, I've met Mrs. Obama before. They told me it was just her initially. Then Mr. Obama was in the room too, and I was like, oh my god." I haven't soaked it in because I literally just walked in here. I think I'm never going to forget that moment for the rest of my life. I went from being really upset after a win to like being really happy. So glad I got to meet them. Yeah, and she just talked about like winning ugly and how that really was winning ugly. I think the line I like the most was, I think most of the time, every Grand Slam you have one bad match. I'm glad I was able to get that out of the way in the first round. And I think that probably is true, isn't it? You know, okay, like the odd Djokovic without dropping a set, aside, most slam winners have one bad match where they're like, and it sort of kicks you into gear. I think I always felt like I never quite believed Murray was, and actually he needs a bad set, to be honest, just to wake him up and kind of get him into it. And I think it is valuable.
Yeah, I think I kind of felt that with Alcaraz at Wimbledon, but that kind of Jarry match. Jarry, whichever one we sat on. But, that he was lucky that didn't go into a fifth and then become a bit of a weird shootout. I do think that sort of kicked him into gear there. So who knows? She'll need to play a lot better to beat Swiatek, though. That's certainly worth keeping in your minds if they are to meet in the quarterfinals.
I mean, she might have to play quite a lot better to beat Mira Andreeva, to be fair, because she's playing her in the second round. Although she also went a set down in her match to Olivia Gadecki. I guess I often think that's the trouble with playing a qualifier. Like, you can just get caught cold. Like, they've played 3 matches, especially at the US Open, where they play on pretty much all the courts except Ash in qualifying. So, like, they're very used to the conditions, and they're pretty similar at the US Open as well. Like, Ash is a little bit quicker, but that's about it, I think. So I think it is sometimes you can just get caught out. Incidentally, George, it's Nicolas Jarry, I'm reliably informed, with a J.
Jarry.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
where I started.
Oh, we're getting better, aren't we? Sorry, Lynn. I know we're not perfect, but we do try.
There are a lot of names as well. I'm not going to be funny. Like,
there's just a lot of names. There's a lot of names, a lot of facts.
From a lot of places.
She's got to be such a polyglot to cover tennis these days. It's a nightmare. Right, the only other things to mention, really, I suppose, are Beatrice Haddad-Maia just beating Stevens, although we actually did mention that yesterday because you were talking about your fantasy choices, George. Świątek and Rybakina made it through. Świątek lost just one game, which is a bit sloppy from her. And Caroline Wozniacki got a win on her return to Grand Slam tennis. Now, I know Calvin's not a big Caroline Wozniacki story, but fan, I should say. But it's a good story, but I think people do kind of remember who she is, and
definitely
that's valuable. And she's been to business school, and she's had a bit of a gap year, and obviously had 2 kids. I think it's she said she was really nervous, which I think you can probably understand. But
people know Wozniacki a lot. I would say, people forget she was engaged to Rory McIlroy for a long time. That was quite a big kind of celeb thing.
McIlroy dumped her by
circles. Yeah,
it's the main thing I remember about
that. Is it a basketball player she's with? He's certainly very tall. I was going to say he's presumably well known in the States. David Lee or something like that.
This is some knowledge from you, George. I'm quite impressed by that. Let me see.
Right, it could be totally wrong.
I mean,
David Lee is also the name of a solicitor in The Good Wife, so it could be totally the wrong name.
David, a former NBA basketball star. They got married in 2019.
What's his surname?
I'm just trying to find out, George. David Lee, you're absolutely right.
Oh,
very good from you. He played for among others, the Golden State Warriors and the New York Knicks.
There you go. So covering the UK and the American sport markets there. Plus she was bezies with Serena for a long time.
Yeah. And also, I had quite forgotten until Mikey Hinks, who's covering the US Open for the Eye this week, wrote in his piece, I'd forgotten she got diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. Which is not something that just goes away. Like, you have to manage it. So...
we should also probably mention she is a former Grand Slam champion and world number 1 as well.
Well, yeah, correct. I mean, bloody hell, she was decent at tennis, but quite apart from anything else.
That's not that important, obviously.
No, exactly. She's got Petra Kvitova in the next round, George. Any chance?
Yeah, there's a chance. I don't think she necessarily will win, but Kvitova could be very hot and cold, I would say.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it'll be good test of her level. I suppose you'd expect her to win that first match in some ways. I see Jen Brady got a win as well. Not to
in the same
jump into tomorrow's show, but
in the same little bit of the draw. Yeah, that's not in tomorrow's.
It's not
show,
tomorrow's.
George.
I've just not written it in the notes. Apologies.
No, you just sloppy planning, really.
Jen Brady.
But no, she's in the same. We could have Wozniacki Brady in the third round if they both beat seeded players. It would not beyond the realms of possibility. I mean, it would be great. Like Wozniacki Gauff in the fourth round. That would be a bit of a blockbuster, I think. Or even Brady Gauff. Although
Gauff good as well.
I mean, I was always very high on Jennifer Brady, and I was right to be so, as it turned out. She's very straightforward, I think, and that a bit like Jessica Pegula, like it's always a bit hard to kind of sell that to the public, and so people don't get that excited about her. But they should. She's been through a hell of a lot. Speaking of people who've been through a hell of a lot, Corentin Moutet has the trainer out on court, which is just like the least surprising thing ever because. Obviously, Andy Murray's 2 sets up and making him pay in the serious heat. But yes, I think we've probably managed to cover it, George, in a startlingly efficient 45 minutes to cover 64 matches, or at least
we've done well.
The important ones thereof.
I'm happy to take one email thing if you like, James.
Oh, sure. It's very generous of you. A bonus question. Who shall we go to? Shall we go to Marianne Vijda? Who has been in touch before, and she says, before the podcast get deep into the US Open, sorry, as you can tell, this is from deep in the mailbag, I was hoping you could answer a question for me about scoring. Is it the chair umpire that scores something as a winner or an unforced error, or is there something else that keeps track of that? Does anyone keep track of forced errors? Just wondering if there are cut and dried definitions, or if some of it is someone's judgment call. For example, if someone misses a second serve return, is that because the serve was so good, or is that just an error on the returner? Or if there's a miss at the net, who decides it was an error, or the pass attempt was just so good? Thanks so much for your podcast. I love it. Hopefully you'll be number one in the US Open too. And she also says, can't wait for the Open. I go most years and be there Thursday, Friday, Saturday for week one. Well, first of all, have a bloody great time, because that is a tremendous set of days to go. I hope the weather's not too sweltering. All I know about this, George, is every court has someone who charts it. At Wimbledon, it's usually a quite hungover-looking 19-year-old sat in a little chair. Quite often, because they're not allowed to have their phone on them, so quite often I'd walk past them, because you can use the alleys if you've got a press pass, like the smaller ones, and I'd quite often walk past them. They just go, "Mate, what's the Chelsea score?" It's just like, and then they'd be like, "Oh, I've missed a point." So certainly on the outside courts. It's more unreliable because the forced error and the unforced error is a judgment call on them, as far as I understand it. The winner thing, obviously, like if it's untouched, basically it's a winner, right? Like there's no, if the returner falls over, it's still a winner, which is probably a flaw in the system as well. But I know Calvin previously
it's definitely
said,
not the chair umpire, though. We can rule that
that's
out.
true. They do nothing these days. They just call the score, right? Maybe we should make the chair umpire do that as well. Give them something to do from their invisible chair.
I was going to say, we're kicking them off the court soon, so they'll have more time to get their pen and paper
out. But yeah, so there is a cut and dried definition of like a winner and an ace, but the forced error and unforced error is pretty...
It's controversial.
Is it?
I think it's quite controversial when you start looking at it, what's counted as a forced versus an unforced error. I think you can seriously skew the stats. If you're unlucky.
I mean, I remember Calvin, not only a couple of months ago, Calvin mentioned this, and he says he reckons it's pretty clear, but it's probably pretty clear to him and to someone else,
I also think it's pretty clear, but I think there are many things I would strongly consider to be forced errors or counted as unforced errers.
Oh, so you think we're too harsh on...
I think it swings both ways.
Okay, fine. I'm just getting completely distracted by Murray Moutet, which is just turning into an extremely entertaining tennis match, which actually shouldn't be that surprising. And Moutet's really getting into it. I suppose I would say to you, is it possible to hit an unforced error off when returning first serve?
Yes.
Okay.
Harriet Dart's serve.
That's incredibly left field, like just shot across the bows of Harriet Dart. I really don't think she deserved that.
I think, yeah, but the speed's
I know what
important.
you mean.
Yeah. And where it's landing and what it's doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
okay.
I would say definitely.
All right, very good. Well, thanks, Marianne, for your question, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. Keep them coming. tennisunfiltered@gmail.com. We'll have Calvin tomorrow, so if you have addressed a question specifically to Calvin, as one or two of you have, then I will try and put them to him tomorrow when he gets back from practice and when I'm struggling to stay awake because it's late here in the UK. And then maybe we'll have George on Thursday. We might have some Mikey Hinks. We might have, well, who knows what we'll have for the rest of the week. But hopefully you've enjoyed tonight. And the most important thing is, apart from leaving us 5-star reviews, that as everyone knows, I read out every time. So if you want to sneak a question in that way, that is the way to do it. But most importantly, please do come back tomorrow.